Okay. Hey, everyone. Appreciate your time. We are going to go over the comments that we got from the RAG technical advisor, Marcus, on the River Mile Lebanese preferred alternative report. And we'll get a little more background as we get in. You can see here a photo of the River Mile Lebanese project area. So in this quick presentation, we're going to do a little refresh on where we are at the River Mile 11 East project area, where we are in the schedule and where we are in the site. And then we're going to go over the RAG technical advisor's comments. I'm just going to say Marcus from now on. And we're going to talk about a little summary of his comments, what were carried forward, and anything that wasn't carried forward, and why that wasn't carried forward. And then we can answer any questions, wrap up, and I can answer any other questions you guys have. So really quickly, a little background just to get everyone refreshed. The River Mile 11 East group is made up of Cargill, Paramount, the City of Portland, Build Trust, Glacier Northwest, and Pacific Core. And it's located around River Mile 11, as you might guess, on the east side. It is the most upstream project area in the Portland Harbor Superfund site, and they are the furthest along. They were one of the first folks to step into design, and so it's really great to work with them because we're really spearheading things. This is a quick schedule that came from a presentation that the River Mile 11 East did for a CAG meeting, showing some of their milestone documents and schedule. So back in 2013 is when the AOC for an RIFS was first signed. Can you guys see my pointer? Yes, you can, right? So I'll just kind of touch on where we are now, which is here in 2023. We just received the draft preferred alternative report. We received many reports from the River Mile 11 East group, and we will be receiving more reports from the River Mile 11 East group. Most importantly, coming up is going to be a phase 2 RD sampling report, which is going to be talking about riverbank sampling. And then they'll move forward into their 60% design report, and then eventually their 95 and 100% design reports anticipated hopefully in 2026. So we received this preferred alternative report, which is a not a typical report for EPA, but was really a report or an idea came up with by the River Mile 11 East group as a way of moving forward in the project area. And essentially, it was a way of documenting the best path forward at their project area. And the objective was to complete technical studies and other analyses to identify the preferred alternative for the project area, hence preferred alternative report. This report did a lot of things. If you could sum it up into one sort of ultimate figure or two, it's going to be probably this figure and the next figure I'll show you, which is this really shows you all of the areas of contamination in this area. And here you can see the Fremont Bridge on the left-hand side, just to orient you a little bit. The Broadway Bridge is going to be over on the right side, outside of the frame here. The Cargill grain terminals are over here. And what this is showing you with these colors here are the areas of contamination. And the hotter the colors or the redder the colors means the deeper that contamination gets, purple being ultimately the deepest contamination. So you can see they're showing us where the contamination is and where it's the deepest. And what they did in this report was broke it into work zones. That's these numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that was a way of digesting the work and coming up with approaches in these different areas for cleaning up the sediment in these different areas. And from there, they took those work zones and came up with different approaches in each work zone, um, and broke it down by work seasons and works. And so you can see down here in the legend here, and don't no need to really get too detailed here. That's what you all have Marcus for, but they broke it down into showing when they were going to be where doing what work. And a lot of that's driven by the in-water work window, which is a work window for the Willamette River that requires you to not work certain times based on essentially salmon runs. That way you reduce your impact on salmonids. And you can see a few things that are big touch points or challenges in the River Mile 11 East project area, like the glacier dock. That's one of the big challenges, a big piece of infrastructure out there that I'm going to pop back a slide. That's right where all that deep contamination is. That's one of the big challenges that they've got. The Cargill dock as well, tons of pilings. There's also the specific core cable that's a cable on the bottom of the river that powers a huge portion of the Pearl District. That's a big challenge. There's also an outfall, outfall 43 over here. That's a city outfall that's dilapidated. Lots of challenges.
Hey, Hunter.
So, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Marcus just said it. Marcus, did you just want to clarify Emil's question for everyone in the chat too?
And Hunter, you can clarify if needed. But yeah, they were asking, Emil was asking about the depth and whether the depth was measured from the water level or from the kind of the surface of the riverbed.
Yeah. And Marcus, Marcus jumped in there and got it right. It's really the bottom mud of the river down, because those surface water elevations, those are fluctuating, depending on the flood stage, and depending on tides even. And so what you were seeing there as far as depths, if we want to look at that, we were looking at over 10 feet deep below ground there. And PCBs, I'll also mention this is a PCB specific figure. That's the contaminant of concern here. And those are the driver in this area and really encompass all of the contamination. So mapping PCBs really maps all the contamination in this project area, generally speaking.
Hunter,
Yeah, Doug.
This is the cement dock, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious where the PCBs came from, on offloading cement.
It's really not associated with the cement business. It's historical contamination from really, yeah. Yep. And so it's really related to chemical manufacturing and electric transformers and numerous different practices that we pretty much don't do anymore. But yeah, just manufacturing and outfalls. Also, you're going to get some PCBs from outfalls as well. And that's because PCBs in the uplands are reaching those outfalls and getting into the river. And so Marcus took a bunch of time to review this document and sent us an extensive comment set. I'm going to go through. I kind of just tried to group them into buckets and just talk about them in generalities and kind of bigger picture. I think Marcus had over 10 pages of comments and many figures, and we don't have the time, nor do you guys want me to put you to sleep going through all of this. But so I'm trying to capture those comments in larger buckets. And feel free to jump in if you guys have any questions as we move through this. I also just want to preface this by saying Marcus did a really good job of kind of jumping in and saying, this is the community's opportunity to provide early feedback. So a lot of his comments aren't necessarily related to specific information in the preferred alternative report, and are more just comments saying, hey, these are things the community is interested in, or these are things that him as the technical advisor would like to see. And all of that EPA is noting. We're reading all of those comments. We're passing them on to the Vermont 11 East group for them to note them. But we don't necessarily have a specific place to pass that forward on this preferred alternative report, but they're great kind of placeholders for us to be thinking about that information in future deliverables. Let's see, I'm gonna just jump in the chat here right now. I see a question from Cassie. If Vermont 11 anticipated deadline for 90 to 100% design is estimated to fall in 2026, where does that leave the other RD areas with later deadlines, or are their timelines more truncated, ending also in 2026? Yeah, great question. I'll move to that schedule page for me. So there are a whole range of project area styles and difficulties. The Vermont 11 East group's going, I think that they're going to take a while to get through that 60% design because of how challenging their project area is. There are other project areas that will likely move faster. There are project areas that we will be getting 100% designs hopefully in 2025. There will be designs coming later than 2026 into 2027 most likely, but it's all a little gray. I mean, it's a little like weather forecasting. We just run into numerous challenges along the way that can speed things up or slow things down. And then I see Laura, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi Hunter. I just wanted to ask you to repeat what you just said. Our suggestions for this PAR are not going to be submitted anywhere. They're just going to be considered by you and us.
Oh, let me clarify. We certainly are carrying forward many comments that are specifically on the PAR. There's comments that Marcus made that are also additional comments. There's many comments. There's comments where, I don't want to speak for Marcus, but it seems like, hey, we have an opportunity to express something that the community is interested in. And so that isn't specifically going to be in EPA's comments on the PAR, but we're taking those comments and thinking about them when we get future deliverables that are relevant to that comment.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And that comes from a place of, we have many project areas and many documents, and we try to be very concise and straightforward with our comments, and try to have a direct ask in our comments. And so, for example, there might be a question on a water quality monitoring plan, and we will make that comment when we receive the water quality monitoring plan, rather than baking in to this comment on the preferred alternative report.
Yeah. That's interesting. So just to clarify, you're kind of retaining comments for use in different times throughout the process. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, got some commenters, I think I would call it out of scope. I think it's good because this is you all's opportunity to get them in our hands, right? And so it's great to receive them, but we try to stay in scope of a document when we're providing comments.
Yeah.
That way they are directly able to address that comment in a revised version of the report. So a question on a water quality monitoring plan, they're not able to address that because the revised report isn't going to have a water quality monitoring plan, even though we have comments from Marcus on a future water quality monitoring plan. Any other questions before I jump back in? And I see Cassie has a comment, but estimated time for AOC for Portland Harbor remedial action is still 2026. And what Cassie's referencing there for is sort of our agreement to start cleanup. And yes, 2026 is still our goal for beginning remedial action. Okay, I'm going to move through some slides here. Get back up. Okay, so the first general bucket for comments was the disposal, where we're disposing of the material that's going to be removed from the site. And generally speaking, so the way I've designed these is the bullets are a summary of what the comments said, and I put in the arrow here what EPA is doing with these comments. So there were comments from Marcus requesting that we consider the community in our decisions, requesting more information regarding a transload facility. A transload facility is the facility that would move material from different forms of transportation, and typically here we're talking about from barges onto rail. There's a suggestion to create a transload CAG group, community advisory group. There's comments that the community does not want waste sent to St. Helens, and a request for a better understanding of transportation options. For many of these comments, and I think most of you will recognize this response from other EPA meetings, but we are not carrying these comments forward. We are listening to these comments, and we understand a lot of these concerns. I mean, we're certainly going to consider the community in our decision making, but we aren't able to pick and choose what facility is chosen for disposal at Portland Harbor. We require that it be sent to a permitted facility, but we cannot dictate which facility is used as long as it is permitted. And that's that's kind of a bigger than us. It's the federal government not picking winners and losers sort of a thing. But I think it's great for you all to be having that opinion heard, and we're certainly listening.
So to
Cassie,
clarify, it's up to whatever performing party or performing parties are a step up for cleanup. Is that who decides? Okay.
Yep. Yeah. We ensure that it goes to a facility that's adequate for the material.
Hunter, do you happen to know if the toxic lagoons in St. Helens are permitted?
I'm not certain. I mean, last I knew, I don't think they were, but I don't know at this time.
Is that easy to find out? I wonder.
We could look into it.
I would be curious.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
I will just jump in because I know, and Cassie might have a better memory on this. I remember there was someone who gave an update. I'm blanking on her name right now at one of the previous collaboratives and led like a tour and stuff. I'm wondering if that person has more info. I just can't remember who that is right now.
I know who you mean.
I'll look it up while we're talking.
I think it was Rachel or someone.
Rachel, okay.
They were never that helpful, honestly. But we could ask again, I suppose.
Marcus, you have your hand up.
Yeah, kind of just to go back to that. So where would the key decision come? Would that be a land use and permitting decision by the city, or the cities that the location would be at? Or where would the community find the first point of kind of opportunity to engage?
Are you speaking specifically about the St. Helens facility or about
any
Portland Harbor?
Yeah, Portland Harbor. Any transload facilities that were proposed?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure to back up for a second that a transload facility is a transfer point. And so that is different from a waste facility, which is what St. Helens would be. So regarding St. Helens, that's going to be, I'm sure, the city of St. Helens and DEQ. DEQ is the folks who permit those types of facilities. Regarding the transload facility, that is something that is going to be in the, the folks who sign up to do the cleanup are going to be involved in. It's something that's very free market. Waste, like a large waste company could just come build a facility on the Willamette River that does this work. And they could do work that's not related to Portland Harbor. I mean, there's already transload facilities on the harbor. The port has transload capabilities on the harbor. Right now, there isn't one really scoped for taking all of this material. Right now, the sort of plan and what most people anticipate and what our cleanup plan predicted was that barges would just go up to the Dalles where there's a transload up there. And that's typically where material is taken off site right now. A performing party, a PRP, could build one themselves. A third party could come build one as a way of potentially making revenue. None could be built, and then they just go to the Dalles.
If they go to the Dalles, does the dewatering part happen here or there?
Both could happen. I would say most likely it's going to happen on a barge.
And that can happen without some sort of transload facility here. Dewatering process can just happen on a barge, like safely.
And they put out water treatment things on the barge and everything. Yeah.
And I got sorry. I was just like, in terms of, I think another comment that was in there was about potential. So where, regardless of where the waste the transload is, like the chance that waste would be stored at that transload facility for any amount of time, because I know, Portland Harbor, there's a capacity issue. And I don't know what priority the waste folks and the cleanup folks would get for transload onto a train or rail. So I'm curious if there's any opportunity to like engage in that, or do you think that's highly likely or unlikely for like storage of multiple days, weeks on site?
It's an excellent question, and EPA has sort of tried to poke and prod the general community, or like I would say like the sort of waste disposal community, as well as the performing parties about this. And we really want to see a transload built because we think it will reduce the carbon emissions from the cleanup significantly, as well as making the cleanup go faster, because taking a barge all the way to the Dalles takes a lot of time. If you can get it on a train and get it out of here, that's great. And it also means nobody's putting material on diesel trucks and going through Portland neighborhoods. So we're very motivated to see a transload happen. The general feedback that we've sort of gotten is like, these folks can build these in not too much time, and what folks want to know before making the investment is the final amount of material that's going to be removed from the site. And so as we move forward in design, those numbers for volumes are getting more concrete, or we're more clear on what that number is going to be, which then the free market can come around and decide how much money to invest in building a transload, where to build a transload, how many transloads. The sort of message we have gotten is like, hey, just hold on, EPA. Let the free market do its thing, and if there's an opportunity, it will be taken advantage of. Did I answer your question, Marcus.
I think so. I mean, it sounds like it's mostly kind of at this point up to the waste operators to decide, all the logistics of this, if first, if they develop a facility, second, if they, if they're going to store waste on site for a set amount of time. But I imagine, like, going back to the original question, that would all have to go through, if not, EPA would go through DEQ and city processes and permits.
Yep. If it's built specifically for the Portland Harbor Superfund site, we will review everything. If it's built for more than just the Portland Harbor site, maybe they want to do other types of material stuff beyond the cleanup, after the cleanup, then they'll have to get permits from the city and the state, and jump through all those hoops.
Great, thanks.
Hunter, just a little bit of logic for me.
Yeah.
Whether you move it up to the Dells as you're doing the work, or you put it in a transload nearby, at some point you're going to have to move it from the transload. So you'll be facing the same issues as you would if you were taking it up to the Dells, right?
Mhm.
Am I misthinking that, misunderstanding?
Nope. You got it. I mean, we either take a barge, one of the pinch points in the cleanup is barge availability. And if you have to send a barge all the way to the Dalles and back, that takes time. If you can take the barge and just send it somewhere nearby, you can do way more barge runs and dispose of more material. And so, folks they're going to have to run the numbers on at what point is it a worthy investment to spend $10 million building a transload facility.
But at some point you're going to have to barge it from the transload to a permanent disposal.
Oh, no, it's a good question. So when they get to the Dalles, it gets transloaded, so it moves from barge onto rail or trucks, and then taken to a landfill.
Okay.
So the transload is switching the type of transportation. And so, yeah, you can do that out in the Dalles, or you can do it in Portland and get it onto a train in Portland. And so it just shortens your barge run.
Right. I guess the question is safely, considering the community surrounding all of this.
Absolutely. That's all part of it. Big decision. That'll be.
And it's a little troubling, honestly, to know that other concerns can use the transload as well. I think we do need a KEG with the transload.
And as we get closer to those decisions, we can certainly be discussing them more. Just right now, it's still just a little up in the air whether we will even have one. So. Another question, Laura?
I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move on unless there's any disposal or transload questions. Next is comments on the dredging technology. So the River Mile 11 East area is a full dredge preferred alternative. In the report, they chose the alternative, or all of the alternatives evaluated really were full dredging. And so, that's great. All the materials getting out of the site rather than capping anything. And Marcus had some comments regarding that, suggesting robust and enhanced confirmation sampling. Confirmation sampling is when you dig it all out and then you go back and you sample to make sure you got everything. And Marcus also requested proper management of the residuals. And so dredging is dirty work. When you dig that stuff up on the bottom of the river, a lot of stuff floats around, makes the water turbid. And so proper management of those residuals, which confirmation sampling is an example of management of those residuals, because you're not just making sure you got it all, but you're also checking on what the residuals were like when they settled back down. And also suggested enhanced BMPs, which are best management practices, and suggested monitoring, enhanced monitoring. All of those comments we are passing on. We pass on a comment requesting confirmation sampling, requiring residual management, and they will be required to do enhanced BMPs that are part of their biological assessment. And we have a water quality monitoring plan template that will require them to do enhanced monitoring, chemical monitoring, as well as water quality monitoring.
Can we add the air monitoring as well?
Got a slide on that coming up.
Okay.
Also, Marcus had some questions regarding how representative the DRET test is. DRET stands for Dredge Elutriate Test. And we support DRET testing, but similar to Marcus's comments about, hey, is the DRET test everything? Essentially, the River Mile 11 East group was trying to make a case for the fact that they don't need to do confirmation sampling. And so EPA has passed on a comment saying, hey, we think you need to do some confirmation sampling, and your DRET test doesn't say everything. So we agreed with those comments and are passing along a comment in that regard. Sorry, I'll pause. Any comments? Next is water quality monitoring. Marcus recommended additional monitoring stations. Requested some statistical information regarding turbidity, and had some questions regarding how that information will be shared. These comments aren't specifically carried forward, but we've made comments requiring water quality monitoring that we think does get to the heart of some of these concerns. When they make their water quality monitoring plan as part of their next design deliverable, we can see how they've adjusted on those comments and potentially make even more comments on the actual water quality monitoring plan. Doug, you have your hand up?
Early on in the process, we got lots of different presentations on the dredging and the kinds of buckets they used. Mm-hmm. Are there any kind of mandates to use the capped buckets that don't dewater as they're coming through the water column?
Absolutely. Those environmental buckets are definitely a best management practice that we're requiring at the site. The River Mile 11 East group's plans are to use some precision dredging techniques too that are aimed at specifically at reducing residuals and reducing turbidity as part of their cleanup.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And so I think, Marcus, some of your comments regarding the turbidity and the statistical information were coming from a place of thinking that the turbidity was going to be the only point of monitoring, but we're going to also include water chemistry monitoring as well, no matter what the turbidity monitoring says. So hopefully that helps relieve some of your concern around that.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious about the relationship, because it did seem like that was the case, and looking at the relationship between PCBs and turbidity. I'm wondering, I think the other piece they mentioned here, and I'm curious on what your all's thoughts were on like the potential for any dissolved PCBs to occur during the dredging process, if at all.
I can't specifically speak to that, but I can say that we're going to monitor for it either way.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then I think the other ones, I know they'll probably come, you said they'll come up later. I think one for this group might be that, yeah, so there was that there was a discussion about like a dashboard essentially that, you know,
Mhm.
they would, the River Mile 11E group would have to say that, you know, if a certain threshold is reached, it alerts you all in real time. And
Mhm.
we're just curious if you all had any like idea of what that would look like, and would that also be like shared with other agencies, or is that too early to even discuss at this point?
I think it's a really cool question, and I dream of the idea that everybody in the whole community could look up in real time what all of the different stations are telling you. But it is a more emerging style of monitoring, and getting all that to be on the web on a government website is also a challenge. But I think that would be the goal. I think that that's some of the ideas um, built into our information management plan, which you guys might have heard us talk about before. So if we can do that and it's not ridiculously burdensome, we would like to be able to have it as transparent as possible.
Some in the chat right now too.
Yeah, Laura's saying it was done at the Duwamish cleanup and put on their website, right? I can't speak specifically to that, but I can say that the folks who wrote this report worked on the Duwamish. So if they did it there, then they can probably do it here.
Yeah, I'm supporting that right now, and I haven't seen that there yet, Laura, but I'll triple check. I think the thing that we've talked about previously is we've done some scoping, and Andrew can talk about this more with the Hudson group on kind of how they showed data during different pieces. And so we definitely are thinking about that. So that's helpful.
Totally. I also see a comment from Cassie. Will OSU get notifications of RFPs for helping with the water testing or water chemistry testing? I'm assuming that's Oregon State. Is that right, Cassie? Is that who you're referencing?
Yeah, because they're currently doing at least a water surface water testing that's extremely comprehensive.
I don't know if they're going to be getting RFPs for helping. I'm gonna guess that the folks will be keeping it somewhat in-house because they're going to be using a big environmental, an environmental consulting firm. But right now they use like GSI, who's based here in Portland, often for their environmental work. But as far as when we get to remedial action, I really can't speak to specifically how they're going to be contracting that work.
Just curious as a follow-up, does EPA have to review and/or approve the subs that they use for water quality sampling?
No.
Okay.
No.
Maybe that's a future steering committee collaborative presentation agenda item. Laura and Charlotte and Doug and Emil.
Yeah, and I can kind of just preliminary say like it's going to be hard for EPA to tell folks who they can hire, but I think that the community can speak loudly to put pressure on folks to hire in a certain way. I mean, you guys, we've been successful with the port, right?
And Cassie, what was the topic specifically? Just so I can I'm taking some notes.
Just like when they have their results. of the water sampling to share that out and then to like just make their services known. Probably PRPs will want to resist working with them because they have so much the technology they're able to use is like really good and detects a lot more even what do you call it? Unregulated contaminants.
Cassie, are you wanting the presentation on the plan before the sampling occurs then? It sounds like you might.
Yeah.
Any other questions before I move on? Next comment area or subject was riverbanks, and there was a comment requesting additional information regarding riverbank sampling and how that information would inform design, sort of like, hey, what if we find a hotspot in the riverbank, kind of a thing. The comment's not carried forward just because really we're going to be getting a riverbank sampling plan in the next month or so, and that'll be the place we would make a comment like that. But you know, that's an example of we like the comment. We're not going to make it here, but we're probably going to make it somewhere else.
Is the riverbank sampling plan site-wide or just for River Mile 11?
Just for River Mile 11, they just have a few data gaps, some areas where they could beef up the amount of data they have on the riverbanks in their area. Any other riverbank questions? Comments regarding infrastructure, additional information regarding outfall 43. That's a city outfall that needs to be moved. They kind of just say, hey, we're going to move it 50 feet. But we want to request for more information on that, and also more information regarding the underwater power line there, Pacific Core's underwater power line. We have taken these comments and we have asked them to include this additional information in their next design deliverable to beef it up.
I have a kind of question that links between these last two slides, you know, with both the riverbank sampling and then the underwater power line. Like these are kind of contingency type questions, right? So, you know, the deal with the underwater power line is if it's not moved or like at the right time, then dredging can't occur in the way that it's currently worded. And the same with the riverbank, as if for whatever reason they find an extensive hotspot there, that could shift part of the design. So I guess I'm just curious, you know, now that this part is done, as they move to like 30 or 60% design, like, you know, how will that contingency piece be kind of controlled or managed?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's a balance. There's always uncertainty, right? And so you have to find the right place where there's enough certainty to take another step forward. And that's where these folks are. And, you know, ultimately they're required to do the cleanup. And so there is no, oh, we didn't get the power line out, so now we can't do it. Well, you still have to do it. That all being said, there's also more at work than just the PAR. The underwater power line movement, that's all going to be done currently outside of EPA's umbrella. I mean, we're definitely watching it and reviewing things, but they're going to try and get that done earlier. They're going to try and get out there and figure out what to do with the power line. And they're going to do it because earlier, because, you know, the power lines outside of their project area, it's all the way across the river. It's not necessarily related just to cleanup. It's something that Pacificor wants to handle specifically Pacificor, not the entire River Mile 11 East group, I don't believe. So Pacificor is working on getting that cable removed right now. Or they're not removing right now, but they're working on it right now. So that will happen sooner than the cleanup. And yeah, the riverbanks, that's just an area where they have certainty from their sort of institutional knowledge about how the previous sampling results were and what operations occurred on the riverbanks and what they believe the sort of the origin of the contamination of the site is really based on, to have the certainty to say, hey, this resolution of information is enough to move to that next step with enough certainty. Laura had a question there, outfall 43. So that is, I can pop really quickly back to this figure. Outfall 43 is a city outfall. It's where city stormwater, collects in these pipes and then discharges out of these pipes. That's outfall 43 right here in this nook here, next to the Cargill facility. And it's old one. Any other questions on infrastructure?
If the outfall, you're at the most upriver part of Superfund here, and the outfall is the upper part of River Mile 11. If, for example, the city moved it out of the Superfund site, would what comes out of it still be monitored?
That's a good question, and the answer is yeah. Yes, the city has their own, outside of Superfund, their own requirements regarding stormwater monitoring. So that won't change. That being said, I think they're just going to move it 50 feet one way or the other, and it'll still be within the site.
Okay. We'll trust you to keep an eye on it then.
Of course. And we've got many outfalls in the site. Hundreds, I think I could say.
100 in River Mile 11?
Excuse me, within the entire Superfund site, I would say
okay.
We're in the world of hundreds. Next is air monitoring, Cassie. Promise this. They recommend, Marcus recommended PCB air monitoring, recommended monthly monitoring using passive samplers before, during, and after construction. We are not passing this comment forward now because the air monitoring plan is not included in this document, but the 60% design document from the River Mile 11 East group is required to include a plan for air monitoring. And so in that document is when we will discuss PCB air monitoring with them. And I see no reason why they wouldn't do some PCB air monitoring at the site, and we'll work with you all and them to figure out how much. And it'll be good too because we'll have a little more time with University of Iowa information too. Any questions regarding air monitoring?
Just again, like the anticipated time for the 60% design would be what, like next year sometime? Yeah.
That's a good question. Let's go back to that timeline slide. So design's 2025. And I can probably say early 2025. And the reason that's so far out really is because this phase 2 sampling, we find that it takes so long to write a work plan, get a contractor, go out in the field, send your material to the lab, and then the labs take so long for that material to get analyzed and for you to get your results. So it's really been hurting our timelines.
There's a question from Charlotte about PAH monitoring.
pH monitoring. It's a great question, and I think that I can say that for sites where we have PAHs, we will certainly have conversations about PAH monitoring at those, and we'll certainly have some pH monitoring involved. This site is not a pH site, so I'm not going to say for sure that it's going to have pH monitoring, but it might anyway. So we'll just see what they bring us first, and go from there. And we have required pH monitoring before at Gasco, like you commented there, Charlotte. Cultural resource monitoring. There was a request to work with tribes, work with the community, and sort of a larger question, how we'll protect these resources. This comment wasn't carried forward because it's out of the PAR scope, but it's definitely something that's super important to us. We have a cultural resources report that was done for the site a few years ago. It's actually confidential. We don't share it because it contains sensitive information, mostly regarding sensitive information for several tribes. And we don't folks going out there and digging anything up. And we require folks to have what we call an inadvertent discovery plan, or an IDP. This is a plan for when you're out there and you find something, what do you do? We require those plans. The River Mile Levy already has a plan to do that for the remedial design work when they're out there sampling. And then when we move into remedial action, we'll have another inadvertent discovery plan to say, hey, when you're out there digging, doing dredging, what do you do when you find something? And ultimately, they're required to comply with the National Historic Preservation Act, which covers all of this, these cultural resource sensitivities. So in all of that, we go through our technical coordinating team, which involves 6 tribes, and they review all of those plans and all that information and provide us feedback. So yes, we want to do all of this. We are doing a lot of it. We're going to do more. We're just not making the comment on the PAR. Any questions regarding the cultural resource monitoring? Habitat and mitigation. There's a request for additional detail on the habitat layer that they're going to lay down after they dredge, as well as there's information about putting plantings on the riverbank. And there's not a lot of information regarding that. And so we agree and pass that comment forward, asking for more information. And when we talk about a habitat layer, typically it's putting down a fish-friendly mix of rocks that salmon-like, and usually it's rounded. It's usually as small as you can make it without getting washed away. But they're a little vague, so we asked for more information there. Also requesting additional information about the habitat benefits and losses that are described in the document. And so we agreed that it's a little vague regarding that. And specifically, we think that there's some habitat losses that aren't necessarily accounted for that need accounted for. And that's some damage from the cleanup that we think is required. And that sounds a little backwards because we're cleaning it up, but underwater remediation is kind of like chemotherapy. Like, it hurts the aquatic system to do the cleanup, but it's all for the sake of a long-term improvement. And if it weren't for the contamination, we wouldn't have to do that chemotherapy. And so they still have to offset the impacts from cleaning the site up. So we carried those comments forward. Several comments stating a preference for native vegetation, diverse vegetation, diversity in the rock size, and ensuring the habitat supports salmonids. We noted this comment, and all of that information is absolutely going to be required. We didn't specifically pass that comment as written, but ultimately they're required to comply with the Endangered Species Act, which requires all 4 of those things. Marcus, you got a question?
In terms of the habitat loss piece, right? Maybe for us collectively, when they're saying there's a habitat loss due to the cleanup process, then they have to then replace that in some way. Can you talk a little bit towards where that might be replaced, or if there are requirements of where that habitat will be replaced, whether it's like in River Mile 11E, in Portland Harbor, or at the watershed level?
Yeah, absolutely. So in our record of decision or our cleanup plan, we emphasize on-site mitigation. Mitigation is what you're doing. That's what you're mitigating for your impact. It's your pro for your con. So we emphasize it to be done as essentially as local as possible. I would say almost certainly it has to be done on site within the Portland Harbor site, but we have an emphasis saying, River Mile 11E's group, you should do it on your site. We are not being specific in what they should do. We are saying, hey, you need to bring us an offset, and we're going to see what they bring us first. We don't want to say thou shall do X. We'd rather them bring it to us, and then we can maybe say, hey, maybe that's great, but maybe a little more. Or hey, yes, that looks great. So we're gonna let them take the first swing at specifically what they want to do. But that being said, our cleanup plan absolutely gives them the ability to also go simply buy habitat credits at one of the restoration banks within the Superfund site. And so that is on the table for them. And I think it's a little bit of a dance, because I think if you push too hard, and they're just going to go to the bank. And so it's a little bit of a dance to try and get something done on site there. And it's also just going to be an interesting thing too, because you can have impacts from, let's say you build a dock, then maybe we say, okay, remove a dock, remove an old dilapidated dock, right? If you armor, put riprap down a mile of riverbank, then go somewhere else and unriprap a mile. But then there's also things that are harder to quantify, like there's a temporary dock. They're working outside the fish work windows a little bit, so it's like a temporal thing. So you kind of end up with, like, you get some apples and some oranges and some bananas, and you're trying to figure out how many kiwis they should go build. And so it's a little bit of a negotiation to figure out exactly how to offset those impacts. But at the end of the day, our focus is their impact on endangered species, specifically salmonids. And so we just want to ensure that their offset will be helping salmonids and salmonid habitat.
There's a follow-up and Emil has in chat.
Yeah, when you say buy restoration credits, what does that mean exactly? Yeah, it's a interesting thing. There's a system where folks can design restoration projects, third parties, and get and then agencies, federal and state agencies can create the system where then folks who need to offset their impacts can then go buy those credits at those restoration sites. So it's a way of sort of creating a market for restoration. And some people like them, some people don't like them. I will say that one reason people do like them is that you can start a restoration bank right now and create habitat right now rather than waiting for the cleanup in 5 years or whatever, and then starting habitat then. And so I think there was an emphasis to try and get some of these banks online now to start creating habitat now instead of waiting for the cleanup.
Is there an easy, and so just an example, so like if they impacted like in half an acre of shallow water habitat, then they have to replace it and they have to buy it from that bank that already created it. But do you know, is there like a list of approved banks that's easily accessible?
So right now there's several restoration banks in the Portland Harbor. There's 4, but most of them are really supposed to be selling credits for NRDA. That's the National, the Resource Damages Act. That is sort of like our sister process where they're compensating for 100 years of impacts to resources, wildlife, as well as recreational resources. And so that's like your PGE Harborton site. There's a site over on the tip of Salvie Island. Those are NRDA credits. The Linton Bank, the Linton Plywood site, there's apparently they're trying to open that site up to be permitted for other types of credit as well as NRDA credit. And so this is all a little inside baseball. Sorry, guys, but apparently the Linton Bank right now would be the place that if the River Mile 11 East wanted to go buy credits, they would go buy them now.
Thanks.
Yep. Let's see. Did I skip a slide? No. Biological assessment. So an appendix of the PAR was a biological assessment. Biological assessments are part of a process where when any federal entity permits or conducts an action that could impact endangered species, they have to consult with the resources that oversee those or the agencies that oversee those resources, and it's called the ESA Section 7, Endangered Species Act Section 7. And so you do a biological assessment. You say, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is how it's going to impact endangered species, and this is what we're going to do to try and reduce, minimize, and mitigate for all those impacts. And then those resource agencies review it and give you their opinion, a biological opinion. And those resource agencies here is typically NIMS, as well as U.S. Fish and Wildlife sometimes. And so there was comments from Marcus asking that they consider additional mitigation strategies for the proposed work window deviations. We agreed and carried that comment forward. Yeah, a comment from Marcus to consider incorporating small pocket beaches and bioengineered habitat. We're definitely noting that comment. We agree with that comment. But as I mentioned before, we simply said, hey, you need to come up with some mitigation to offset your impact. So we're going to see what they bring us. They're very well aware that I'm interested in, the resource agencies are interested in more creation of shallow water habitat. That's something that a whole group of resource agencies and trustees, including tribes, sort of all came together and decided that's one of the number one things we can do to benefit salmonids in the lower Willamette River is to increase the amount of shallow water habitat. And so they're definitely on notice for that. And then also there was a comment about how the public will be informed about fish consumption risks. And that comment, we're not going to make it to on the par because it's not really for the Vermont 11 East group, but I can answer it, which is that the Oregon Health Authority is the folks who conduct fish advisories. They currently conduct a fish advisory for the site, and we'll probably have an enhanced fish advisory while we're out there conducting the work. I'll pause if there's any questions right now. Thanks, Laura, with the acronym definition there. When I say NMFS, that's the National Marine Fisheries Service, who's part of NOAA, the National Oceanic and something atmospheric division or whatever. You guys know NOAA. Any comments on this one?
I think Hunter, just like for the fish advisory piece, because I know that the vision, right, is that when we start construction, and this is why Multnomah County has been doing the fish advisory education for OHA, and I know that we've been working on, and Josie Clark, another RPM, has been working on establishing like more funding and a kind of more robust program for that as an institutional control moving forward. All of that I think kind of plays into that point, right, Hunter, about the fish consumption, because the vision, at least for right now, is that the resident fish consumption would go to 0. So enhanced. Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. That's another part of the chemotherapy. 0 fish consumption, and the cleanup's going to take over 10 years. Any other questions on that?
I guess. Well, I don't know if this will come up. I think just a general question about, I think this question has been asked in different ways before, but like, where kind of considerations of lamprey may or may not come in, and the type of habitat they depend on.
Yeah, totally. I got that coming up.
Okay, sorry, got it.
You're fine. I think I went wrong. Yeah, right here. So there was a comment requesting more information regarding the habitat equivalency assessment, otherwise known as HEA, and we've made several comments similar to Marcus's, and took some of Marcus's and passed those on. The habitat equivalency and assessment or analysis is like a tool where you do surveys of an area and say, hey, this is what it looked like before the cleanup, this is what it's going to look like after the cleanup, kind of do a before and after comparison, saying, hey, was the habitat better or worse after the cleanup? And if it's worse, you get a score and how worse, and you can use that to determine what kind of mitigation or offsets you need to do. So we agreed with those comments and passing those on. And also recommended lamprey mitigation techniques. We've taken some of those and passed them on. We have a lamprey appendix as part of our site-wide programmatic biological assessment. And lamprey are not an endangered species, but they're a culturally significant species for the tribes. They're definitely challenging to do work with lamprey, because you take a scoop of the Willamette River, you're probably going to find some lamprey ammocetes. That's essentially baby lamprey. And so figuring out what to do about those and seeing if we can figure out if there's areas of known large nesting sites and things like that. All of that is definitely best management practice that we're going to be asking folks to do. Questions?
I guess,
Mhm.
you know, you said kind of some of the comments from these are taken forward. I think, you know, one of the comments for the lamprey specifically was going back to that habitat classification about, I think, the deeper water, the deep zone, they were calling deep zone in there. And they gave it kind of a really bad, they gave it a poor, like a really low score, essentially, for the deep zone, remember? And I imagine if you gave it a little bit higher score, then you'd have a larger impact on the lamprey. So I guess I'm curious about that. You know, that would ultimately end up with higher mitigation needs for lamprey specifically.
Yeah, and you know, regarding that in those numbers and those scores, that HIA and all those numbers were chosen by the trustee council, that the Portland Harbor Trustee Council, which is National Marine Fisheries Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and 6 tribes, and really, you know, we really just trust them that the weight of those scores is appropriate.
Got it. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, that helps.
Yeah. Any other questions on these? That's all. That's all I had for those comments. If there's anything, Marcus, if you use anything that I didn't touch on that you want to talk about, or any folks have any other questions, happy to answer.
I have a quick one that I'm just looking through the comments. And so there was, so the creosote question and the pilings. I'm just curious on what your thoughts are on that, because I think during the CAG meeting, the consultant stated that they did not contain creosote, but then there was a section of the report that says, you know, the Reach 2, Stan Herman, is stated to contain hundreds of creosote treated remnant piles, caps, stringers. I'm just like kind of trying to align those two comments together. You know, what is kind of the status of creosote in that area?
Yeah, it's a good question. Probably a good thing to bring up. So specifically regarding that, I would say that I'm not sure about the comment that was made in that meeting. What we have on the record is that those are likely creosote piles. In fact, most of the piles, you know, these dilapidated remnant pilings you guys see up and down the Willamette River are most often creosote piles. And so we don't like those. Which, you know, kind of, I just want to mention that too, Marcus, some of your comments were sort of stating that pilings could be seen as habitat. We disagree. They're habitat, but not necessarily habitat for salmonids. They're usually habitat for piscivorous fish that prey on salmon. And so we do want the pilings removed. They're also sources of contamination. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. I do, yeah, I do recall, I think a few of us were kind of curious about when we were at the CAG and then we came out of it, that we had heard that those were potentially those pilings would be reused for some of the docks because they would be, they were clean. So, you know, I think there was that remaining question of like, is that, how will we know if they're have creosote? So that's just a kind of that was a standing question for us.
Yep. No, and if anybody pulls a creosote pile out, the thing's got to go. There's not. I mean, yeah, we want as many of those out of the river as possible, which is a great part of this project. A side effect is that I don't know hundreds of piles are going to get chopped off or pulled out, which is great.
I personally don't have other questions, but I definitely appreciate your time. I'm not sure if other folks have questions.
A quick creosote question. I'm wondering, you just said, Hunter, sometimes they get chopped off and they're left in the river. Are they still releasing, contamination? What is it? I don't know what it is, but
Yeah, no. So when they're cut off, or we have specific requirements that we try and get them to do. We ask them to try and cut them below the mud line to cover them up. Is there some remnant contamination potentially? Is it significantly reduced? Yes. And often, we say first thing is try and pull it out. It's usually just sometimes you can't pull them out. Sometimes they just break. These things are 100 years old. They'll just snap. Maybe you can't get a hold of them. And you also there's also some, you don't necessarily want to go wiggling this pile around when it's in a huge thing of contamination, because then you're just stirring contamination up. So it's a little bit of a spectrum. What's the best thing to do in different situations? There's different answers for that. But the ultimate goal is get as much of them out as possible. But as far as the amount of contamination, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of piles left in the Willamette, the Columbia, and Puget Sound and everything. So it's sort of that larger accumulation of creosote contamination that's the larger concern. And so as long as we just do our best to get as much out as possible, it's just it's a significant reduction.
what are they releasing? Is creosote dioxin? I forget.
You're right there. That's going to be beyond me. I'm no chemist. I just know that they do release, chemicals that are from the creosote. So.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? I don't know how much time I have. I can answer just other Portland Harbor questions if anybody has anything.
I don't know that we have any.
Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. This was great. This last slide is beautiful.
Yes, this is one of the previous risk assessors at the site took this picture. I think it's so great.
It is
This is
really
wonderful, wonderful photographer.
Cool.
I think this is from the Cathedral Park Bridge.
Yeah, St. John's Bridge.
Yeah, St. John's Bridge.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah.
Nice.
Oh yeah, Charlotte has a question for you, Hunter. But I did want to say thank you, Marcus and the RAG. These comments that you made were really, really good, and I skimmed through them briefly because I've been gone. But this was this was very helpful for me, this presentation. And Hunter, I know he works really hard and has been coordinating with the Vermont 11 East group for a really long time. And so just want to give him a lot of props in the Vermont 11 East group too, but all of you as well. This was, I wanted to ask, it sounded, Emil, like you thought this was helpful, but also just would love to hear if this was helpful, this presentation, because I know it was for me coming back in. But if there's any comments, on how we can do this better, because this is really the first main one that we've done for a project area. We did, Willamette Cove a while back, but this was kind of the first main one. So if you have any thoughts on how, do this even better, I thought, Hunter, you did a really good job, but any feedback is great.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and Vermont 11 East group, we really, in my opinion, did a great job with this report. We're making all our comments saying, hey, we support the preferred alternative, address comments in future deliverables. Ultimately, the thing that personally I'm really excited about with the approach that they're going down here is getting everything out. They are not capping anything. They're making no excuses. They're getting it all out. These folks do not want to be on the hook for monitoring forever. They want to get it all out, and I think that's really great. It's going to be super expensive and a lot of upfront capital, but I think it's really great.
I have one question for you, Hunter, and you can say no, you don't answer. But just, was there anything, because I know a question we've gotten before, because the RAG has great comments, but just high level, if there were any kind of big, comments that the technical coordinating team made that were carried forward that maybe the RAG didn't make, and if you don't want to answer that, you can talk about it later, but just kind of since I know you're very familiar with that too.
Yeah, for sure. I think that we got a lot of positive comments from the TCT. Probably the most positive response I've ever seen on a document. Really, the comments revolve around potential mitigation for the work, and so EPA's comments as well as the TCT comments are like, hey, we love this approach. We like that you guys are getting everything out. The only thing is all of this work, like they're constructing a temporary dock and working inside the work window. We think you can do it, but you need to mitigate. And right now, there's no proposal to mitigate. And so that's what we're arguing about right now is like, hey, let's do this. We like your approach, but we think you need to offset your impacts. And so let's get some offsets included, and then we're good to go. And so that's where the TCT really weighed in more heavily, and where EPA is still, while we said the PAR is good to go, we're still going to have some specific comments on the biological assessment that we're going to wrestle over. Yeah. I'll also mention real quick, I saw a comment in the chat. Is the Gasco test underway? And yes, the pilot test is going on right now. They are out there with a giant auger, mixing some cement into the riverbed there. So far, it's been going really good, just as far as, the big thing for me is what are our water quality impacts while doing that work. And so far, the water quality impacts have been none to minimal, way less than I thought. Honestly, I thought we'd be stirring up a whole plume, and it's been really minimal so far. So that's been great. Other questions or comments?
Well, if not, what do you think we call it a night? It's been we were thinking it would be 5 to 6 and might go over, but we did go over a little bit. So
okay, let's call it.
Yeah.
It was great, Hunter. Thank you so much. I think this was very valuable. And also, Marcus, thank you so much.
Yeah, totally.
Good process.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah,
to see
well
you,
done.
Laura Knudsen. Happy birthday and welcome back from Hawaii.
Yay, happy birthday.
Thank you. That's amazing. You know when my birthday is. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Nice to see
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night. Thank you.
Mark, were you able to
Stop
attend?
going.
Oh, are you able
Good
to
night,
attend
Mary
on
Ellen.
Saturday?
What?
Anybody that can attend on Saturday? I just wanted to check in.
Yes, yeah.
So I'm gonna put some stuff in the notes there. In the
What was
running-
it, 10 to 2 that you had the openings?
Yeah. Oh, I'll
Oh.
stop recording. Hold on.